Our co-authors, Chris Gilbert and Eric Hazeltine, of course, are in the room. And we're going to hear from Chris about resilience from within. It's really the themes of the book explained in person. So thanks very much, Chris.
Oh. Oops. Let's see. Okay. So hi everybody. So I'm going to talk about resilience from within, but also within organizations. And what a better example of resilience is to talk about the story of Dr. Katalin Karikó. Who knows who Dr. Katalin Karikó is? Yes. She is the inventor of the messenger RNA vaccine against COVID-19. And she got the Nobel Prize in Medicine last year with Dr. Drew Weissman. But that hasn't been a very smooth ride. She has had obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. First, she grew up on a farm with no running water, and that was in Budapest, in Hungary. No running water, no refrigerator, and no television. They had to be completely self-reliant, and they were all sleeping in one room, her dad, her sister, in one room with a sawdust stove to keep warm in the winter. They had a hot house. Life was not easy on the farm, but she got very interested in biology at a very early age because her dad was a butcher. So she would look at the heart of pigs and the liver of pigs and how her dad would cut those pieces. So she decided to go for a PhD in biochemistry in Hungary. And everything went well until her lab run out of money. She was at that time very interested already in the messenger RNA possible technique, because she thought the messenger RNA is the little piece of RNA that goes from the DNA to the cell, inside the cell, to tell the cell to create such or such protein. And she thought that if she could put inject little pieces of RNA, messenger RNA, inside the body of humans, she could tell the humans to make the proteins that the bodies were missing. She thought that could be sensational and life-changing. But unfortunately, her lab ran out of money, so she applied for a postdoc position in the United States, and she did get a position at Temple University in Philadelphia. And she had to come to the United States with only $50 in her pocket because the Hungarian government would not allow her to bring more money than that. So what did she do? She sold her car on the black market, and she got $1,200 for her car. She opened the teddy bear of her daughter, 2-year-old daughter. She sewed the money inside that teddy bear, sewed it back up, and that's how she came to the United States with her 2-year-old daughter and her husband. And so she worked day and night. She finally managed in 1990 to get a position at the University of Pennsylvania. And she applied for grants, right? That's how you do it. That's how you get to a tenure position. But she could not get any grant because all the people she knew had left, because she had not done any publication, nobody knew about her. So at one point there were 7 people applying for grants at the University of Pennsylvania. 6 of them got a grant, but only one did not, and that was her. That was Katalin Karikó. So what did she do? Well, she continued working and working, but in 1995, the University of Pennsylvania told her, well, it's either you get a tenure position as a professor. She was a research assistant professor at that time. Either you get a tenure professor position, and then you need to stop your research, or we get you demoted, and you get just you stay in your lab or in a lab, because you need to find a lab, and then you'll get much less money, but that's your choice. What did she do? Resilience. She said, I'm going to choose to be demoted, and I'm going to continue my research because I do believe in it. She had to struggle to find a lab that would work with her and accept her, and the people that accepted her were threatened to not get a tenure position because they were working with her. And then she continued, and she continued working. She really believed in her work, and she knew she was progressing. One day, every day she was progressing, little bit by little bit. As she explains in her book, Breaking Through. And then in 1998, she met, just by chance, Dr. Drew Weissman. Dr. Drew Weissman at a Xerox machine. They were all making copies of research articles. Dr. Drew Weissman had funding, he had money, and he was doing some research. He was trying to create a vaccine against HIV. Katalin Karikó had no money, but she had the means. She said, maybe I can help you with a messenger RNA. And they started collaborating. It was a wonderful collaboration, and they created a company called RNARX. But they needed investors. They tried finding investors. They would not find any investors. Nobody would invest in their company. So they continued studying and working the problem, and finally they managed to create a messenger RNA that was finally accepted by the bodies of mice, that was not rejected, and it would create exactly the protein that she wanted. Wonderful, and that was reproducible. She wanted to publish that in a major journal. No journal would accept her publication. Nobody. It's like, what? So what did she do? She did not give up. In 2013, she went to Germany and presented her work to Dr. Ugur Sahin, who was the CEO of BioNTech. The CEO said, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to hire right away as a VP of my company, BioNTech. They were interested at that time in doing a universal flu vaccine. And as they succeeded, and as they were about to start clinical trials on humans in 2019, suddenly the pandemic hit. And they said, okay, let's just rethink the whole thing, and let's do a messenger RNA vaccine against COVID-19. And that's how they were ready for that pandemic, and that's how they saved millions of lives because of the messenger RNA vaccine against COVID-19 that was taken by Pfizer and then Moderna. And that led to a Nobel Prize last year in medicine. But it was over 40 years, talking about resilience, more than 40 years of hard work. So that's her story. I thought that was a good illustration of resilience. And now I'm going to make a parallel between her story and resilience in Buddhism. So Buddhism is something that I've been writing on for Article for Psychology Today, and so there are different principles in Buddhism. The parallel is that Katalin Karikó had mindfulness. She knew that she knew that she was progressing every single day. So she was very aware of what was really happening. That's sati in Buddhism. She knew about the fact that things were changing all the time. It's impermanence, anicca in Buddhism. She knew about non-attachment. She didn't get attached to a country. She went from Hungary to the United States to Germany. She knew about that, so upekkha. And she knew about kindness in Buddhism, kindness, metta. It's important to have compassion, not to be angry, not to hold on to frustration, but be kind and collaborative. And she knew about wisdom, the fifth principle in Buddhism that I chose to illustrate resilience. Wisdom, which is prajna. No, she knew when to quit and when not to quit. So about Buddhism, I interviewed in my Psychology Today article several times a 91-year-old Berkeley Buddhism professor, Professor Louis Lancaster. And I interviewed him several times, and I asked him to record a 1-minute interview specifically for you guys, explaining what he thought about Buddhism and resilience. So I don't know if we can have the sound.
Give me 1 minute. Animal puppets, honey.
Yes. Yes.
While we're waiting, I have a question about the story.
Uh-huh.
So the story resonates with me.
Uh-huh.
Because I've moved to continents and things like that.
Uh-huh.
But and I understand the issue with grants. Grants are not blinded. People see your name, and if they don't like your name, they're not going to give you money, right? But for publications, that's usually blinded. So what was the issue with publications?
That's a good question. I think they did not believe that it was doable, that they believed that the messenger RNA was it didn't stay long enough, and they didn't believe that it could be worked, created, kept alive, and then being able to be injected so they would create proteins. They really didn't think it was possible. They thought, yeah.
Even though her research showed that it was possible, they knew it wasn't, so they didn't accept it.
Buddhist tradition says that in order to be resilient, we must be really aware of what's happening to us and to those around us. It's that awareness of what's happening that allows us to deal with whatever issues we're faced with. And if we're not aware, and if we're unconscious of what's going on around us, then we make big mistakes or make errors. So that's why the Buddhists have continually said to people, be mindful, be attentive to what's happening. And in that, you will find that your response will be a compassionate one, because you will really see what's happening to people.
That's it. So I'm going to go back to the first principle, mindfulness. And it's very important to be mindful of who we are. Again, by training, I'm a physician, so it's very important to be mindful of what our body needs, what our mind needs. Are we doing anything that we're passionate about? Or are we doing something that we're completely bored with? If we're passionate about what we're doing, our health will be better. Our immune system will be stronger. So be very mindful of your body, your mind. Be also very mindful, if you work in a company, of the company itself. Is the company really successful, or is it just on paper? Is it just a facade? Talking about facade, I'm going to talk about the Potyomkin village. So it's the myth is the myth of Gregory Potyomkin, who was a minister, Russian minister, and the lover of Empress Catherine II. And in order to impress her, he would put along her way facades of villages to make her believe that she was going through very wealthy areas. But when you would go behind the facades, there was nothing. So is the company the same way, or is it different? Be mindful of that. Some managers and CEOs of companies are going to just only address crisis. So if there is crisis after crisis after crisis, they're going to kind of whack-a-mole. Like, there's this mole coming up, it's like, whack this mole, and whack that mole, and whack it, and another one, and another one is going, oh my God, another one, and whack, and like, oh! And before you know it, the time is gone. So how do you address what is important? So we say with Eric, very often the tyranny of the urgent is going to trump the pursuit of the important. So be very aware of this. So what we need someone with an overview of the situation, right? So in the CEO of the company, we need to go downrange or in the field and ask the workers, what is the problem? At each level, go and ask, what is the problem with the people working for you? And be very much aware. Just ask them in a friendly way. When I was working for Doctors Without Borders, I didn't stay in France. In the headquarters of Doctors Without Borders, I went in the field. So that was me in Sri Lanka, and I was working in a refugee camp with 27,000 refugees. That was during the Civil War, and we had to go and see, for example, latrines. We had built 250 latrines for 27,000 people. Going down in the field, we saw that was not enough. We really needed to build 300 latrines in addition. How about water reservoir, chlorination? That was not, we went and we saw there was not enough chlorination. We had to add much more chlorine to our water reservoirs. That's another assignment that I had that was in Mozambique. So in Mozambique, I had my private plane, I had my private pilot, and because all the roads were mined, that was also during the Civil War, so I had to go from clinic to clinic with my local plane, and I had to inquire in the villages if they had received their quota from the UN, the quota of flour, of sugar, of dry milk, and sometimes they had received everything, and sometimes they didn't. In the villages, they didn't receive what they were supposed to receive. And I learned at that time that there is what I call evaporation, that at different levels, some of the flour, sugar will disappear to be resold so that the people that are wealthy will become more wealthy. And if I hadn't gone in the field, I would not have been aware of that. So important to be aware of what's really happening. That's awareness. Second principle in Buddhism is impermanence. Things never stay the same. Change is inevitable. This is, on the left is a little girl who is 2 years old. In the middle is an adolescent who is 17 years old. And on the right is the person you might recognize who is a little later in life. And as you can see, they're not the same. So change happens and it's inevitable. There is, if you look at the original 500 companies in 1955, and you see if they're still there in 2023, well, only 10% of the original 500 companies are still there. They're still in, and why? Only 10%. Because they did not adjust to change. Here, you've got very often the Department for Change, which is on the left, and this is the inventor. And the inventor really wants to change things. And then in the middle is the Department Against Change, which is the bureaucracy. And then the inventor is trying to push. Oh, you're going to push and push and push, but the bureaucracy doesn't change. It's got so much inertia. What do you do? How do you deal with that? So 3M is a company that managed to deal with that, and they were in the original 500 companies, and they're still in the 500 Fortune 500. And why? Because they diversified, and also because they've decided that 30% of their profit would have to be from products that were not there 5 years prior. Netflix is also a company that was successful and still in the Fortune 500 because it changed from distribution only to creating their own original content. So be aware that there is impermanence. Non-attachment, third principle. Do not get attached to feelings, like feelings of anger. Do not get attached to, that's what Buddhism said, do not get attached to frustration. And no, do not get attached to the past. Do not get attached to an invention that is not going to be successful. Do not get attached to an idea and learn to embrace new ideas and learn to embrace the future. And an example of this is the trapeze artist that will go from one ring to the other. So here is the ring that it needs to let go, right? And so it's attached to that ring, and then I'm going to call it the ring of the past. And when the ring of the future arrives, sometimes it doesn't take it, so that doesn't take him anywhere. Then sometimes it takes the ring of the future, doesn't let go of the ring of the past, and that's not a good solution. So what you need to do, have the ring of the past, take the ring of the future, let go of the ring of the past, grab the ring of the future, and fly into the future. Non-attachment. Blockbuster did not do that. Blockbuster stayed attached to their model of renting videos and cassettes and went under, had to close down. Kodak remained attached to their chemical model and tried to make a better chemical model, but didn't go digital, and that didn't work out too good. Fourth principle is kindness. Kindness, stay really nice to people. Collaborate with people. And thank you, Jeff Warren, for what you said and what you did, because you're a perfect example of what I'm going to demonstrate. You're going to tell me that some people and some CEOs of companies have been very successful and they were not so kind. Yes, Nancy, it is true. So when you create a company, it's true that sometimes some people are nasty and they've got to fight and they've got to be the red chief and fight. But when the company is established, it is really good to be the white chief and to be friendly and collaborate. There are a lot of things that have been done and achieved through collaboration. One person, I don't know if you've seen Oppenheimer, the movie, but he didn't collaborate, and he talked very badly, Oppenheimer, about Admiral Strauss in a Congress hearing, and Admiral Strauss, he belittled Admiral Strauss, and Admiral Strauss remembered that forever and destroyed his career. So be careful who you step on your way up, because you'll meet that person on your way down. And also keep your words soft and sweet. You never know which ones you'll eat. Now I'm going to bring our book, written with Dr. Eric Hasseltine, who is going to talk a little bit later. we write about riding the monster. And the monster is really the big bureaucracy. So if you stay in front of the monster and say, oh yeah, I've got this great idea, but the monster is going to, it's going to devour you. The monster is against change, right? It's just like, and that's it. You're going to be history. So what you need to do is ride the monster. And that's what we demonstrate. You go behind the neck of the monster, and then you can stir the monster. So what we say is, you can present big ideas to a bureaucracy, but make your big idea as small as the mind that has to approve it. So an example that we talk about in our book is the example of Steve Crocker. Steve Crocker, who did a PhD with Professor Len Kleinrock. Thank you, Len. And so when we interviewed Steve Crocker for our book, he talked with so many compliments about his professor, Len Kleinrock. And he is one of the inventors of the internet. They are both the inventors of the internet. And what Steve Crocker said is that Professor Len Kleinrock told his students, we've got to find a way for your computers to talk to other computers, to communicate with other computers. So Steve Crocker was with Vint Cerf, and they had to get together with PhD students of Stanford Research Institute, of University of Utah, of University of Santa Barbara, and find a way for their computers to communicate with each other. And they did that in restaurants, like in a Szechuan restaurant in Palo Alto. And Steve Crocker says, before our bits could travel, our butts needed to travel. That was in the 60s. And finally, in 1969, Steve Crocker sent the request for comment number 1. And that was the beginning of the internet. So collaboration, getting together in front of meals and good drinks and talking with other people and finding a way to advance science. So what we say in our book is that in order to go from one rock, that's the rock on the left, which is the rock that represents the innovation, the brilliant idea, to go to the rock on the right, which is the successful product that comes from that great idea. Usually, inventions fall into the middle, in the valley of death. And what we say with Eric is that in order to prevent them from falling into the valley of death, you need a bridge of trust and collaboration. And you can either be part of that bridge of human collaboration, you can walk on that bridge of human collaboration. So important to collaborate. And the fifth principle is wisdom that I choose. There are other principles, but those are the ones I chose. So know when to quit. The stork is trying to eat a frog, and the frog is trying to strangle it, and which one is going to quit? So know when it is time to quit. There is a book written by Annie Duke called Quit, which is very interesting. And it talks about the expected value. You need the expected value of whatever you're going to do, whether it's an investment or a relationship or a brilliant idea, an invention. She says you've got to calculate the probability. What is the probability of you being successful versus what is the probability of you not being successful? And you add all those probabilities, and then you have the expected values that will tell you if you need to quit or not. And what she says is the more time and energy and money you spend on one particular project, the more difficult it is going to be for you to quit. So you need to know that. But in reality, if this project is not going anywhere, like it would be like trombone oil, which is not a big market, then by quitting, you're going to have more time and more energy and money for something that will be more successful. So what we say also is it's important to do a disaster preparedness. So in general, we have like what do we do if there is a gunman that comes into your building? You prepare for that. What do you do if there is a fire that comes into your building? You prepare for that. But what we don't prepare is change. What if the market changes? What if, well, the stock market changes? What if the consumers want something completely different that was not before? What if the suppliers change? They don't have the same product available to supply you. You've got to be ready. What if there's a war that comes out? What if there's a pandemic that happens? You've got to train, and usually when you're not trained for a particular disaster, you're not going to react well. So the thing to do would be to train for change. Because if you don't train, and if the tsunami happens, then you're going to be taken by that tsunami and you're going to be destroyed. So, in summary, I would encourage you to choose one. You don't need to work on all of those, you can just work on one of those. But mindfulness, to be aware of what is really happening here and now. The second one is impermanence. Know that changes are inevitable. Third, non-attachment. Be open to new ideas, new projects, new invention, and let go of the old ones. Kindness. Collaborate with people. As Jeff shows, it's a recipe for success. Wisdom. Know when to quit and prepare for changes. And are you ready? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. That was by far the most animated presentation, not just at this meeting, but by many. There were a couple of themes that I really wanted to ask you about that. Before you go. Yeah, don't go away yet. So, can we back up one?
I can back up. Oh, okay.
The list.
Oh, prepare. No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, the question, right, this one. So impermanence and non-attachment. If we had a little bit of time, more time in this morning's board conversation, I personally would have called out these two things as some of the secrets I've learned at Vanguard about future-proof is, how learning to let go. I'm not sure. I'm not expert at that, but I'll ask you. Maybe you have better insight into. I mean, it's easy to say be open to new ideas, but actually letting go of things. I love your analogy of the emotionally. That is so. Even about non-emotional things, letting go of. I don't know, an old car and moving on to a new one, even though it's clear that... Is there a secret to sort of accepting this impermanence and developing a more of a culture of non-attachment, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to decide what do you want? What is it that you really want? So be aware of who you are. And once you define what you really want and you put it out there, then what are the steps that, and they have to be just little steps, just one little step at a time, because a big step could be very threatening, but a little step at a time. What is it that is needed to go in that direction? I'm very analytic, very practical, so, and once you do one little step, you will see that, oh, I got one little step in, nothing bad happened. I can continue. What is the next little step? And this way, and at one point, I mean, you have to choose. if maybe your endpoint will be not to let go. Some people like to collect stuff and not let go of anything. They like to keep all their cars. This is the one I had 40 years ago, and then that. But you've got to decide what your endpoint is, and everybody's different. That's why people. It's so amazing to see the human nature, because everybody is different. Not two persons are the same. And what is it that you want? What is it what you want? What is your end goal? And without any criticism, we don't need to, we have to accept that this is who we are and that's what we want, but we need the goal. And that becomes much easier this way. And then things happen by themselves once you define that. Because if you want to go there and if it's not compatible with the past, then you have to let go. If you really want to achieve that, you've got to let go of that. But if the goal that you want to attain is compatible with not letting go, well, that's fine. But define your goal.
Does anybody have their own solutions to this question?
Yes.
Well,
Like-
I think we hang on to the old, not realizing that it's a sunk cost, right? And by letting go, we can acknowledge that it's a sunk cost. There's no value in holding on to it. We've already paid for it. So it should be easy, but psychologically, it's not.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of energy that we spend by not letting go. For example, anger or jealousy, or if we have a lot of anger and resentment, we're going thoughts are going to come back and back and back in our mind, and that's going to use a lot of our energy and brain power. But if we let go of that, then there's much more space for inventions, for something new. But it's true that we've got to be really careful. The more money, the more energy we spend for something, the less we'll be willing to let go. And if we have successes or if we have failures, the failures will be more important in our mind than successes. So we've got to keep that in mind, in perspective.
Eric?
Yes. Dr. Chris is an optimist and believes in the best side of human nature.
That is true.
I'm
say
not
that
that
as-
way.
I was just-
I worked at Disney and I was a spy. What can I say? But I think that her countryman Jean Monnet said it best. People only change out of necessity, i.e. let go, and only recognize necessity in crisis. So I think that left to their own, people will never let go. They have to be in a crisis, which means as a leader, you got to create one before it creates you. And so that's a really hard part of being a leader, is to anticipate and cause crises that force people to pry their fingers off that thing they won't let go of, because otherwise they never will.
Yeah, but the crisis did happen. COVID-19 did happen, a pandemic all over the world, and that didn't solve the problem.
Yes, but one point, if I may, is that you have to be ready for a crisis. You're not going to be able to create them all. And when I was at NSA, I said, we got 2 wars going on. We have a tech transfer problem. 2 wars, I mean, this is going to sound horrible, but wars are the best thing for innovators there ever was, because now people are in crisis. And so you have to keep your eye out open for a crisis and surf it, because those will be the times when you can cause people to let go and to move forward.
All right. I'm going to let you go. As you do, well, first of all, let's thank